Welcome to the Heaven on Earth podcast, a world where you study the story you were born into and redesign it into the story you choose. A world where you can have heaven on earth right here, right now, no matter the past. For me, heaven on earth is a holistic experience, leading with the heart, engaging with mind, body, and spirit. It's mindful, fostering calm and secure attachments. As we rise into consciousness, it's an earthly journey where we sensually embrace dynamic living.
There's a way that I've come to understand life, and I teach it when I'm teaching the dynamic meditation method, that is both very simple and at the same time endlessly profound. So I'm going to talk about that today. Hi, I'm Claudia Cauterucci. I am the podcast host, and this is a psycho-spiritual podcast, not a religious one, where we put a topic on the table and we look at it from multiple points of view, but especially from a particular signature approach that I have called the all is in the small and the small is in the all, where I take my psycho-spiritual experience as a psychotherapist, but also as a spiritual seeker, and apply it to what's happening out there in humanity. Basically, I go from the human all the way out to humanity and to what's happening on the globe. Our homes is our home on planet Earth. So let's dive right into this. The 3 volumes, these aren't chapters because chapters feel tidy to me. They feel like nice and clean, something finished and neatly closed. And they're not exactly phases, because phases suggest like a clean progression. They're more linear, and they rarely reflect how life actually unfolds. I call them the volumes because the volumes can overlap. At different points in your life, you'll find that some of the volumes overlap. And you can revisit them. You can go back to the middle volume. So throughout your life, you can revisit them. You can find yourself living in more than one at a particular time and at the same time. And sometimes without realizing, you can find yourself stuck in one for a long time, for years. But before I begin, let me say something really clearly. This isn't a scientific model. It has not been peer reviewed. It's my own personal model, and it's the one I like to teach just because I always teach in visuals, and I find that it's helpful to the folks that I work with. So let me offer it to you as a conceptual model. It's emerged from decades of clinical work, from a trauma-informed practice, from spiritual inquiry, from my own elbow grease as I've navigated my own Claudia Cauterucci's Dante's Inferno and Teresa Davila's ecstasies. I've had them myself. And when I listen to thousands of people trying to make sense of their own inner lives and the world that surrounds them, and I'm sensing that this is a perfect moment to drop this particular podcast. As always, take what resonates, throw away what doesn't, just let it go, and approach this as a meta view, as a drone view, as a way of orienting yourself, especially when life feels pretty confusing, overwhelming, or painful, scary. Because one of the most regulating things for the human nervous system is context, giving it meaning. Shout out Viktor Frankl. Having a sense of why something might be happening rather than immediately collapsing into the belief that something is wrong with us or that something terrible is happening that we cannot explain. I'm not saying it makes it easier, but it definitely helps frame it. And when we feel framed, it does calm us a little more. Remember how much I believe in swaddling, how we swaddle little babies, and there's different forms of swaddling that we do as we become adults. And so take context as a way to swaddle you. Let's go ahead and start with volume 1, the story that is written for you. There is an old Jesuit principle that is often attributed to Ignatius of Loyola, and it goes something like this: give me the boy, and I'll show you the man. I've sort of morphed it into a more inclusive and accurate version of that idea, which is give me the child and I'll show you the adult. And what does that mean? It means that in volume 1 of our life, when we are children, the story is written for us. It is just given to us. When we arrive onto planet Earth, when we are born, we don't arrive thinking, evaluating, reasoning, analyzing. Neurologically, infants and young children live primarily in delta and theta brainwave states rather than beta. Translation. So what does that mean? They live in a hypnotic state, a trance-like state. They are unconscious. It's the same state that is accessed during deep meditation or hypnosis, meaning the brain is soft and wide open. It's not barricaded with all sorts of ego structures. It's just sort of in receiving mode, it's open. So in volume 1, you are quite literally in a trance. You're not choosing, you're not discerning, you are recording. You're like a recording machine. You're recording how love is expressed, how love is withheld. You are recording how anger is handled, whether emotions are welcomed or feared, whether conflict is safe or dangerous. You're recording whether you are seen, mirrored, delighted in, or managed or shaped to fit someone else's needs. You are recording culture, race, gender, religious expectations, or the absence of them. You are recording family mythology and the spoken and unspoken rules about who you're allowed to be. In psychology, there's a word that I really, really love, and I'm going to offer it to you, and it's called introject. I love it so much. It really hit me hard when I was learning about it. Introject is the idea that you just swallow things whole. You don't digest them. You don't analyze them. You don't take them apart for your own personal understanding. And volume 1 is a time where you're just introjecting all the time. All the isms, racism, sexism, classism, all of those introjections. You're just taking it in, and all of it becomes your internal operating system. You've recorded it. Sounds a little like AI, doesn't it? And that's not a far-fetched principle. As humans, we do come in and we're just taking in the information. And we're thinking, this is the way life is. This is how I move through the world. Now, for those of you who are Buddhist, because we talk about the topic on the table from multiple angles, for those of you who are Buddhist or who believe in reincarnation or multiple lifetimes, there is also the idea that we don't arrive empty. That volume 1 may be a continuation of something that came before. I'm not going to elaborate on that in this podcast, but I want to acknowledge that some of you experience life that way, that we have brought things from a previous life and are going to play them out in this current one, or are going to learn the karmic lessons in order to up-level in this one. That's a whole other podcast, but I do want to throw that in. Even with that possibility, volume 1 is largely unconscious. We are not aware as children. And yet there are glimmers. These tiny, small, luminous interruptions. I love this. These are moments when the authentic self peeks through despite everything. Like a child who sings in a family that does not sing. A child who dances, who draws, who obsesses over outer space, who questions, who who feels deeply, shout out empath. In a household that values control and conformity, keeping things uniform. A child who senses very early on, I am different. These moments are glimpses of what I call the I am that I am, which is a very high spiritual concept, and it's biblical. For me, what that means is I am my essential self. I remember in early elementary school, I have glimpses of those moments. I remember I went to a school where we had a very strict uniform, and it was a pinstriped uniform. It was blue and it had white pinstripes, and we had to wear a short sleeve collared white shirt, these very common uniform, and we had to wear white socks and black shoes. And I would insist, I probably looked so corny and nerdy and awkward, but I would insist on wearing red Dr. Scholl's. And I also had red Scandinavian clogs. And I would just insist on wearing them with my uniform. And yes, I looked so nerdy and I would get in trouble. I would get in trouble. After a while, I think they just started letting me wear my red clogs or my red, imagine, red Dr. Scholl's. I don't know if you've, go look those up, with my socks. But I just felt that I wanted a pop of color with that uniform. And I wanted to not wear black shoes. I just knew I wanted a touch of difference. I knew it back then, first, second, third grade. In volume 1, those little glimpses of glimmer are often redirected, corrected, minimized, shut down. For a lot of people, they are shut down. I want you to be thinking about it right now. When were moments? Maybe when you were a little boy who liked to play with dolls. Maybe you were in a extremely aggressive neighborhood, but you just loved going to the library and reading books. I hear lots of stories about these glimmers, and I like to hear them because I track them as I'm learning about this person. I love them. So sometimes we begin to quietly abandon them because the pressure from the outside to conform, to be uniform, to mimic what's around us. Go check out my podcast on Mimic, the Mimic program, is pretty strong. And it's possibly not with an intention to harm anyone. In fact, it feels dangerous and harmful to be different. Even for our parents, if our parents were immigrants or from another race, it feels dangerous to call attention to yourself, which is why so many people lost their original language, etc. Because belonging is a survival need. We want to honor it. It's part of the root chakra, the foundational system. Security, stability, safety, and belonging. We want to belong. But isn't it beautiful to also feel like we belong when we're different? Anyway, don't get me started. So volume 1 is the story that is written by others while we are walking recording machines. Let's go with volume 2. And volume 2 is the awakening story. The awakening story and the inner journey. You know how I beat the drum on the inner journey. Volume 2, I want to say, begins around adolescence, though it doesn't announce itself super loudly or clearly at all. And volume 2 is long. It's messy. It's non-linear. It's often misunderstood and it's often pathologized. It's hard and it's ecstatic because this is the volume when something begins to stir beneath the surface of you. Again, as I'm talking, I want you to start remembering. Connect the dots for your own life. When I'm teaching the dynamic meditation method, and I teach the 3 volumes a lot, because volume 2 is where the dynamic meditation method comes in, because I call this the sleeping volcano. I actually have a meditation for the sleeping volcano. And the way I show this picture while I'm teaching the workshop of this beautiful mountain with clouds around it, because I always say, isn't the sleeping volcano when it's sleeping so beautiful? And all along, it's getting filled with unexpressed emotion, with suppressed truth, with unlived desire, with introjects from our caretakers or the system that is surrounding, with unprocessed trauma, and in some cases, severe trauma, with abandonment wounds, etc. You catch my drift. It's getting filled and filled and filled. And then slowly or suddenly, it begins to. Sometimes it feels like it's erupting all at once, but it actually isn't. It erupts in bursts. And these eruptions often show up as anxiety, as depression, as panic attacks, as existential confusion. Who am I? Right? The I am that I am. Who am I? As identity questions. They show up as divorce, as breakups, as sleeping around, as blackout drinking. Pick, choose. It shows up profoundly, discovering that the life that you are living no longer fits. It usually is that something feels tight. Sometimes these eruptions arrive as passion, not always pain. Falling in love with someone completely different from your family, from your race, from your ethnicity, from what your religion or your culture expected, sometimes arrives as feeling called towards a life that has no resemblance to the one you were handed. Maybe you do want to join the military, even though you come from a very liberal family. Maybe you do want to join the Peace Corps, even though you come from a billionaire family. There's all these ways that it begins to show up. And here's something I want to say clearly and how I work. I see volume 2 as information. These are callouts. These experiences, the way I like to talk about them, are messengers. They are signals from our authentic self saying there is more here. There is more truth here. There is more of you asking to live. Even in those panic attacks, and you've heard me say it in other podcasts, there are pockets of healing that explode. Maybe they show up as a panic. Maybe they're bringing you down as a depression because it's saying, I cannot continue to live in this form. It's asking for something. And I love working things in this way. What is coming up to be healed, to be looked at, to be explored? And so volume 2 is where the inner journey begins. This is where people seek therapy, read the books, explore spiritual paths, are up at night questioning their addiction. They're questioning inherited belief systems, and they begin this slow work of self-reflection. Are you thinking of things right now as you listen to this? I'd like you to. I'd like you to think of the moments in your life that you couldn't help it, but go inside and ask yourself some questions. Yes, we've been talking about the dark night of the soul, and it sometimes, often, I would say, feels like that. Why? Because it's a cognitive dissonance. It's going against what you recorded as true, as real, what was given to you. Why it's scary is because it's going against what has made you belong. That's what the empath leader is all about. Whoa, this is how I'm valued. This is how I've belonged in these groups, in this group of friends, in this family. Right? And belonging is a survival program. So imagine all that stir, all that conflict that's going on. You might go to another country and experience anxiety. Why? Because it's so different from everything that you've ever lived, etc., etc., etc. You start coming up against those beliefs, everything that was, all your introjects, let's put it that way. You start coming up against your introjects. But we want this. We want this. Okay? We want to pick and choose from the buffet of our life. Do I like that or not? And we want to discern and ask ourselves. So at its core, volume 2 is not about suffering for suffering's sake. Listen to that. There is a light at the end of the tunnel because it is about freedom. It is about freedom. Humans are not just happiness seekers. At our deepest level, we are freedom seekers. And the freedom that we are truly seeking is the freedom to be unafraid. Moment of silence for that. Is that beautiful? Did you know that you were a freedom seeker? Did you know that? Gorgeous. So you know how I always talk about the all is in the small and the small is in the all. So we've got to go to the collective. Let's look at the collective mirror and ask what happens when a whole people enters volume 2. So we're going to pull back. We're going to widen the lens because the all is in the small and the small is in the all. What happens in an individual also happens inside a people. Civilizations have nervous systems too. They have identities, adaptations, wounds, festering wounds, unconsciousness. They're in a trance. They're introjecting. They're sleepwalking. And they also have awakenings. There are collective sleeping volcanoes. Just like individuals, societies move through volumes. And again, take it or leave it. I'm just trying to give an image of this idea of volumes. And I'm simplifying. Always, I do baby talk. There are times when a nation is in volume 1. A nation is unconsciously inheriting and repeating what came before. And then there are times when a nation, your country, enters volume 2. The collective volume 2 looks remarkably similar to the individual volume 2 because there's heightened emotion, there's polarization, there's anxiety, there's panic, there's anger, there's confusion, there's lots of questionings, there's shock, there's passion, a lot of passion, lots of emotions. And there's a sense that the old stories no longer work. They just don't fit. History is full of these moments. So for the United States, for example, the separation from England was not only political, it was a sovereignty eruption. It was a collective declaration that a people would no longer live inside a story that was given to them. So this has happened all over the world throughout history. All sorts of revolutions where a whole people or a country said, this just doesn't fit in. The civil rights movement was a collective awakening. I would venture to say it was a collective urge to claim freedom. It was the shadow of a nation, right? We've talked about the shadow raising into consciousness. It was a declaration, an insistence that the story include those who had been excluded. So globally, we see the same psycho-spiritual pattern again and again and again. Mahatma Gandhi led a nonviolent revolution rooted in inner sovereignty. So did Nelson Mandela after decades of imprisonment. And remember, sometimes we're imprisoned by our own mental structures, what has been given to us. We are imprisoned by our addictions. We are imprisoned by certain cognitive schemas. Imprisonment is not only physical. Nelson Mandela came out of prison and he wasn't driven by vengeance, but by a regulated inner state that made reconciliation possible, right? This is the journey of the individual. It looks like it's against someone. Let's say when you're individuating from your parents, it might look like you are against them, against their belief system, and against inherited mores. But it's not that. It's an urge to be who you want to be yourself. But there are people around you who will experience it as an against experience. So freedom, whether it's personal or collective, is always preceded with upheaval. Have you ever had a panic attack? Woo! Talk about upheaval. So let's talk about sovereignty. It's a word I use a lot. It's a word I use a lot in the Empath Leader book. It's such a delicious, rich, multi-layered word. And so let's talk about it in the personal and in the collective. Sovereignty simply means, baby talk, the ability to self-govern according to your own deepest values, without being coerced, without being dominated, without self-betrayal. For a country, sovereignty means choosing how it wants to exist within its own borders. For an individual, sovereignty means regulating your nervous system, choosing your own values consciously. The DDD, you discover your data, you make your own discernment, and your own decisions. And likely you refuse to abandon yourself in order to belong. These are some big moves. This is what Carl Jung would call individuation. We individuate. And it doesn't always have to be violent, by the way. It can be respected, but often it is violent. There is a violent sense to it, especially if the people around you don't want you to be sovereign, because it's too threatening. It's too threatening when the wheel goes around like this, right? What's it called? Counterclockwise or clockwise, and then you decide to walk this way. So in a dysregulated nervous system, whether it's individual or collective, it seeks control. Of course, control makes us feel stable and safe. Of course. But consider that in a regulated nervous system, we can tolerate difference. We can tolerate complexity and change. You know why? Because we're really seated inside of ourselves. Complexity, differences, and change doesn't impact who we are because we know who we are. We're lighthousing inside of ourselves, my loves. Can you see the importance of this inner work in order to regulate ourselves, in order to find who we are, the I am that I am? Because then what other people are choosing to do is theirs. So let's move into volume 3. And volume 3 is what I describe as heaven on earth. Shout out, Heaven on Earth podcast. It's the heaven on earth life that is threaded together bit by bit by bit by heaven on earth moment. And I want to slow down here because this is often misunderstood. Volume 3, heaven on earth, is not perfection. It is not just bliss and paradise, although we have more and more blissful moments. Heaven on earth is not bypassing. How often do I talk about the dark night of the soul, the shadow, the inner work? And the other thing is, it's not the absence of fear, okay? It is not the absence of fear. It's actually integration. Heaven on earth is when we're able to pull back into ourselves, all parts of ourselves, even the gooey, sticky shame that we've talked about, even moments where we feel envious. We just bring it back all to ourselves. We put it all on the table and we start to pick and choose what we want, what we like, what still needs healing. Volume 3 and Heaven on Earth is what becomes possible. Remember, possibility to me is the magic of life, is what makes things magical, is when we can believe in what's possible. It's actually what compels us into evolution, because we can actually visualize and start moving towards what is possible. So volume 3 is what happens and what becomes possible after you've walked through those you've spelunked sometimes. You've crawled your ways through the corridors, the hallways, the doorways of volume 2, and how to stay within your self. In volume 3, you know yourself. Moment of silence, moment of honor, not just intellectually, somatically, holistically. You recognize your internal signal, your limits, your rhythms, your urges, your passions, your resting states, your joyful states, all yours. Listen to me say, your, all yours. After analysis, after discernment, after having it go through your body, processed through your all your operating system. You understand yourself enough to know how to self-regulate. You understand your emotions. You're no longer dominated by them. You're the DJ, remember? You're calibrating your internal world. You're the DJ of your internal world. You know when to raise the volume, when to lower it, when to seek balance. You can observe your thoughts. You become the observer instead of being consumed by them, ruminations, obsessive thinking. And because of that, your capacity to focus and create expands. Your body feels calm. Even when there's a lot of triggers around you, they just don't hit. There's not a place for them to find the hit. You're more settled. You're at home in yourself. Remember, heaven on earth moments. Hoem, home. It's a play on words. You're coming back home to self. Your mind feels clearer, less reactive. You're less fragmented. Oh my gosh, you're not split up into a million personalities, a million people you have to be, a million different reactions inside of yourself. Woo! That experience is so intense as to feel fragmented. Spiritually, not religiously, because religions can sometimes feel like outside constructs. Spirituality feels like it's coming from inside of you, even though it touches the outside. But it comes from inside of you. It's not been given to you from the outside. It's literally where your inside and the outside touch. And it feels beautiful. It feels sublime. You feel connected to the invisible currents of life, whether that be the quantum field, whether that be angelic frequencies. Choose whatever language that you like, whether it's the energetics around you, right? We talk about this in the Empath Leader. I've talked about it a lot, becoming psychically and energetically literate. We're in touch with our intuition. We're in touch with meaning. And as an empath, this is incredibly profound. It's like, whew, I can breathe now. I can exhale because it's part of who we are. You're no longer absorbing everything around you. You've created this personal sovereignty where you know how to put boundaries up. You're not a revolving door. You choose who comes in and comes out of your personal country, of your personal nation. You're no longer doubting yourself because someone else is more dominant or louder than you. And your ability to feel environments, to feel energetics, your way of being sensitive, this sensitive radar, does become an actual instrument that you know how to use. You're the expert at it. And it's not available for your wounding. But let's talk about something that's rarely spoken about, honestly. This does come with a price. When you're a freedom seeker, there are prices to pay, my loves. We pay a price for freedom. We pay a price to find our own internal compass and balance. So volume 3 often requires losses. It may require disappointing the people you love. It may require leaving the roles that once defined you. It may require choosing relationships that make sense to your soul, but maybe not to your family. Whew, this is hard stuff. This is hard stuff. Do you see what I mean by we're not bypassing? It may require moving, changing careers, cord cutting, coming out, breaking generational patterns, or becoming the different one in your lineage. Yes, yes, yes. Freedom is not free. Sovereignty does have a cost. That's why the inner work is so important. And yet the reward is this, and it's a huge reward. You become the author of your own life. Bam! Volume 3. Heaven on earth. You're not waiting for permission. You're not beholden to what everyone else is saying. Wow, talk about imprisonment. When you're always worried about what others are saying, and we don't blame you. What others have said have crucified people. We don't blame it. We have it in our DNA to be terrified of what others say. But imagine finding the freedom from it. You're not always negotiating your life. And again, I always say it's not that we become fearless. We just become braver. We become more audacious. And yeah, we still have fear to make the moves that we need to make, to be audacious, to insist, to be persistent. You've already survived not knowing who you were. You've decided that no matter how you showed up on planet Earth, whatever that might mean, how you showed up on planet Earth. Because, see, sometimes people are worried. In my practice, I see this a lot, that they have to reject everything. No, it's the opposite. You pick and choose. That is the buffet. Abraham Hicks talks about this. There is a buffet of life. You decide that you don't like tofu, but you love broccoli, right? From your family traditions, you decide what you want to keep from the holiday traditions and what doesn't serve you. You pick and choose. We don't have to reject all of our introjects. We just look at them. We look at them and say, this I want to keep. This I will let go. Pick and choose, buffet of life. You get to go to other places and decide, I love how they do that. Even though it's not my tradition at all. I see a lot of traditions that I absolutely love from all over the globe, from all over. Who doesn't love a beautiful Indian wedding? My gosh, personally, I love Colombian Christmases because all ages are represented, from the little kids who are running around to the grandmothers who are sitting in the corner watching everyone in the middle dance. Love it. There's so many things that we can pick and choose of in this beautiful place called planet Earth. Anyway, I'm getting passionate. This is part of who I am as a sovereign human being, is that I love seeing the glory of what other cultures are doing. So at the collective level, volume 3 is when a people consciously curates the internal experience of a nation. Do they choose regulation over chaos? Do they choose integrity over domination? Do they choose uniformity or diversity? Do they choose evolution over repetition? This is why healing is not indulgent. It is what precedes evolution. I always say this. One of the things that trauma, at least from my experience with trauma, what I've seen, and I really want you to, this is its own section and it's only a sentence or two. What trauma robs us most of is possibility. It's very, very hard to dream of possibilities or of a future because we're so trapped either in trauma routines. Go see that vlog on my my YouTube channel, which is the need for us to be in a routine in order to stabilize ourselves. It feels too scary and too chaotic to be out of a routine, but then we get stuck in the routine. It's a paradox. So we stay and do the same thing over and over because of trauma. And sometimes that looks like wanting to go back to the good old days. Okay? Because moving into possibility does require expanding. It does require taking risks. It does require moving past the ceiling of whatever level that we're in. And so when we begin to reach for possibility, to move into evolution or expansion, it also means that we feel securely attached, that we have a regulated nervous system. That's why it all goes together. A child who feels stable, secure, safe, and belongs will take more risks, will explore, will evolve. And that is true for a people, a collective. I have so much to say about this. In any case, it starts shutting it down. So because self-reflection and the inner journey are based on asking ourselves questions, befriend questions, you all, right? It makes us interesting and it makes us interested. I always say that to my son. Listen, stay interested because it'll keep you interesting. Curiosity keeps us interesting. Asking questions of others, of ourselves. Yeah, and poking at our tradition. Okay, so here's some questions. You ready? What volume are you in right now? Where do you see yourselves? And remember, this isn't linear. It doesn't go like volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. It sometimes overlaps. Sometimes we got through some stages. I just had 5 years since COVID of a lot of volume 2 with a lot of volume 3 overlapped. But I'd already established a lot of volume 3 from my 20s and 30s and 40s because I'd done so much inner work. I had a constructed volume 3. So when I hit another period of volume 2, which has been since COVID, a lot of stuff came up, a lot of eruptions, I could actually just pull it over into this new little infrastructure that I had built in volume 3. So where are you? That's a question. Which volumes are feeling alive for you right now? Which volume? What I'd like you to think of is as if you're going through a really powerful volume 2, if you're having confusions and identity questions and anxieties and depressions, or maybe you are noticing that you have an addiction or that you're constantly afraid of what people think, all of those existential questions. Start just to ease your own soul. Start putting what you actually still love and like into your volume 3. Because as we're going through volume 2, if we know about our heaven on earth life, if we know that we love walking, put it in there. If we know that we love, I don't know, Christmas Eve from our family traditions, put it over there. Just if you know that you love red high tops, no matter what, and you've loved them since you were 10, put it in heaven on earth. Put it in volume 3. Just start populating volume 3 as you're going through these writhing convulsions of volume 2. Another question is, where do you think the collective is? I think we all know that answer, but lots of eruptions on the planet. And it's a very clear struggle about what Earth used to be, what traditions used to be. And this is all over. It's all over the planet right now. Humans are just asking that question and who we want to be. And I want you to notice that as there are more signs of evolution, old traditions lock down a lot harder. And it also disturbs peace and calm. And so we might be tempted to just regress into the old because it's what feels safe. That's okay. You get to choose. You're sovereign. or you get to say, I want to move into the new as a collective or as an individual. What might we be trying to birth both inside of you and around you? Every heaven on earth life, whether it be personal or collective, is preceded by a volume 2 awakening. It gets turbulent as we up level or as we decide to just stay where we've always been. Remember, we are the sovereign choosers of that. We're not here by accident. You're not here by accident. You are a part of this evolution. So I hope the 3 volumes are helpful to you in looking at it and putting yourself on the map of those 3, and also putting this time, this moment in history on the map. And know that in volume 2, we need assistance. We need tools. We need support. We need others, whether it be personal or whether it be collective. We need it. And we need guides. We need guides who have done this journey and who can hold our hand as we're going through the journey. Thanks for sitting with me. Thanks for taking a walk and listening to me. I'd like to ask you to follow, share, comment, suggest. Please, right now, go bling, hit that button, because you know what we're doing. We're shifting humanity's algorithm slowly, slowly, slowly. But the more of us that are doing it, the more it'll move towards an algorithm of healing and evolution. I'll see you on the next one.